Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we plunge into your sources to bring you the most compelling insights. Have you ever really stopped to think about the ancient allure of bonsai? These miniature trees, they're like living sculptures, somehow managing to capture these vast landscapes, but in a tiny pot. It's a truly captivating art form, isn't it? A real blend of nature and artistry.
It truly is. And what's, particularly remarkable about the Ficus genus, which is a huge favorite for bonsai enthusiasts everywhere, is its surprising resilience
Yeah.
and just its incredible adaptability. I mean, these things have been around for millions of years, mastering survival, really, which makes them, almost perfect for this miniature art form.
So today we're taking that deep dive into the fascinating world of Ficus bonsai, and we're specifically tailoring this for you, focusing on how these incredible trees don't just, survive, but actually thrive in the unique conditions we have here in Australia. We're really going to hone in on areas like Sydney and up to the mid-north coast of New South Wales.
Yeah, our mission here is to really pull out the key insights from your sources. We want to help you understand what makes figs unique, how you can cultivate them into these stunning bonsai, and importantly, how to adapt the techniques specifically for our local Australian weather patterns. We'll mainly use Celsius and centimeters for temperatures and measurements, but we'll back that up with the approximate Fahrenheit and inches just for broader context.
Okay, so what can you expect from this? We'll cover the biological wonders of figs, pinpoint some popular species for bonsai, navigate those specific climate challenges unique to our region, thinking Sydney, mid-north coast again, and hopefully arm you with the essential bonsai techniques to create your own little green jewels right here in Australia. So let's start right at the beginning. What exactly makes ficus so special from a botanical perspective, maybe even historically? It feels like there's such a rich story there.
Oh, it really does. The Ficus genus is, it's truly ancient. We're talking dating back maybe 20 to 40 million years. It's part of the Moraceae, that's the mulberry family, and it covers around 1,000 species. And, they're not just trees. They can be shrubs, vines, even epiphytes growing on other plants. But beyond just the sheer number of species, the humble fig has, profoundly shaped both human history and natural ecosystems.
Wow, profoundly shaped. That's a big statement. How exactly?
Well, ecologically, they're just absolute wonders. I think the most fascinating part is their unique pollination method. You see, each ficus species has this exclusive symbiotic relationship with its very own tiny fig wasp. These wasps are tiny, only about 2 millimeters, that's roughly 0.08 inches long. Without that specific wasp partner, no seeds can develop. It's really an incredible example of coevolution. And they're also a critical food source for just countless wildlife, fruit bats, monkeys, birds, you name it. And it's worth mentioning there's a distinction between the edible figs we know, like Ficus carica, and the inedible capra figs, which are the ones that actually host these tiny wasps.
So this tiny, tiny wasp is absolutely essential for the fig's survival, its reproduction. Yeah. It's amazing how nature sets up these intricate partnerships, isn't it?
Absolutely. And culturally, Ficus carica, the edible fig, was cultivated over 11,000 years ago in the Jordan Valley. That makes it one of humanity's very first domesticated plants. Then you have Ficus religiosa, the bow tree, which holds immense spiritual significance, sacred in Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism. It's famously where Buddha is said to have attained enlightenment.
Right.
And you even find references in biblical stories, Adam and Eve's fig leaves, and even NASA once recognized Ficus alaska, the rubber plant, for its pretty impressive air cleaning abilities.
What's one of the most maybe surprising aspects of their growth for you? I've heard about strangler figs, and just the name alone sounds, dramatic.
Oh, it is dramatic. Yeah, the strangler fig, like Ficus bengalensis or our own Ficus macrophylla, the Moreton Bay fig, it often starts when a seed germinates high up on a host tree, maybe dropped by a bird or bat.
Right.
Then it sends these roots cascading down, eventually reaching the ground. As these roots thicken and fuse together, they literally envelop and girdle the host tree, cutting off its nutrient flow and outcompeting it for sunlight. Eventually, the host dies and decomposes, leaving the fig standing alone, sometimes as a hollow shell or developing into this vast banyan-like structure with multiple trunks. In Latin America, they have a great name for them, matapalo, which literally means killer tree.
Killer tree.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's important to clarify, though, they don't actually parasitize the host sap like mistletoe might. They just physically outcompete it, strangle it.
So it's not really parasitism in the strict sense, but more like a slow, powerful takeover of its space. It truly reshapes the whole landscape around it. Exactly that. A really famous example is the Great Banyan in India. It's a single Ficus bengalensis tree that covers over 4 acres. It looks like an entire forest, but genetically, it's all one tree. This kind of shows how some figs are epiphytic, just using a host as a platform, getting nutrients from rain and debris, while others, the semi-epiphytic ones like stranglers, start that way but eventually root into the ground and become independent.
Before we move on from the basics, I've heard the milky sap you get when pruning can be a bit of a concern. Is that something we need to worry about for the tree itself?
Ah, the latex. Yeah, the white, milky sap. It can irritate skin and eyes in some people, so it's good to be cautious, maybe wear gloves. However, the flow of sap during pruning isn't actually harmful to the tree at all. If you find the look of it objectionable, the white weeping, a quick spray with water usually stops it pretty effectively. It's just part of their unique biology.
Okay, good to know. So given all this incredible variety and resilience, what traits make certain figs particularly good candidates for bonsai, especially thinking about us here in Australia?
Right. Well, ficus species are really highly valued for bonsai because of several key things. They tend to produce dense twigging, which gives that mature look. They can reduce their leaf size pretty well with the right techniques. They often form those dramatic aerial roots we associate with figs. And they develop a good basal flare, that thickening at the base of the trunk, which really adds to the illusion of age. And crucially, as you said, they're incredibly resilient and adaptable. That's a huge bonus for any bonsai grower, especially dealing with varied climates like ours.
So which species should we be sort of looking out for then? The ones that are well suited to our conditions here?
Well, globally, you see a lot of Ficus benjamina, the weeping fig, Ficus microcarpa, Ficus salicaria, our own Ficus rubiginosa, and Ficus natalensis. A really fantastic option is the willow leaf fig, which is quickly known as Ficus salicaria, not narrofolia, as it used to be called.
Willow leaf. Okay.
Yeah, its name comes from its leaves. They're long, slender, sort of lamp-shaped, like a willow's. It's incredibly adaptable, grows pretty fast, forms excellent trunks, and it readily produces those aerial roots. Makes it a real favorite for many bonsai artists.
I know the Chinese banyan seems incredibly popular everywhere. What makes that one such a go-to for enthusiasts?
Ah, the Chinese banyan, Ficus microcarpa, that's probably my personal favorite, especially for indoor bonsai. It just tolerates such a wide range of conditions. It's generally less prone to dropping its leaves than F. benjamina, which can be fussy indoors. And it develops excellent character, good rootage, good ramification, meaning lots of fine branches, and of course those sought-after aerial roots.
Yeah.
You find common varieties like Green Island, which has rounder, thicker leaves, and Tiger Bark, which has interesting mottled patterns on the bark. And it's worth noting, a lot of trees you might see labeled as Ficus retusa are actually variants of Ficus microcarpa.
Okay. Yeah. What about something truly local? A native gem for Australian growers, especially in our region, Sydney, up to the mid-north coast.
Absolutely. Our very own Port Jackson fig, Ficus rubiginosa. Its leaves are typically around 5 to 10 centimeters long. That's about 2 to 4 inches, but they reduce considerably with bonsai training, making it best suited for medium or large-sized bonsai, generally. It's often styled in an upright form, showing off its sturdy nature. Its leaves are thick and waxy, which means it tolerates dry air remarkably well, useful indoors or in drier spots. And mature leaves often have this distinctive hairy, rust-colored underside, though some cultivars, like one called Australis, don't have that. Critically for bonsai, though, it has really robust rooting, and it tolerates heavy pruning very well. This makes it ideal for techniques like grafting, fusing trunks or roots together, and developing those aerial roots. It's a really forgiving and rewarding native species.
That sounds fantastic. Are there any other figs that are particularly noteworthy for, say, specific bonsai styles, maybe smaller ones?
Yeah, definitely. For smaller bonsai, what we call shohin or Mame Ficus Bert Davy
Yeah.
from South Africa is great because it has naturally small leaves. There's also the creeping fig, Ficus pumila, which is technically a vine but has tiny leaves and can be trained. And specific clones of Ficus microcarpa, like one called melon seed, also stay quite small. If you're after a bit of seasonal interest, Ficus ingens, another South African species, produces these lovely red new flushes of growth.
This all sounds wonderful, but
Yeah.
how do these fantastic figs, many coming from quite different climates originally, how do they actually fare in our specific Australian conditions? Particularly thinking about Sydney and the mid-north coast, what's the secret to getting them to thrive here?
Yeah, that's the key question, isn't it? What's fascinating is just how adaptable figs generally are, but, understanding our precise local climate is absolutely key to their success. You really can't just apply generic advice you read in a book meant for, say, Europe or North America. Now, for Sydney and the Central Coast region, the environment is often described as pretty much ideal for many figs. We have those warm, humid summers and generally mild winters. This often allows figs to thrive outdoors pretty much year-round. Sydney, too, shares that quite humid environment, which figs tend to love.
Okay, that's really great news for a lot of us listening. But how much cold can something like the Port Jackson fig, our local star, actually handle during winter? Is it really as tough as it seems?
Well, this is interesting. While many general bonsai books might suggest a minimum temperature of around 10 to 12 degrees Celsius, that's about 50 to 54 Fahrenheit, some of the sources we looked at indicate that Port Jackson figs can actually tolerate air temperatures surprisingly close to freezing. We're talking maybe never to 0 degrees Celsius, which is about 28 to 32 Fahrenheit, especially if they're on a protected veranda without serious injury.
Really? That low?
Yeah, one account mentioned a tree surviving exposure to late June cold, deep winter, showing severe damage but then rebudding successfully. However, the general advice still recommends avoiding temperatures dipping below 6 degrees Celsius, or about 43 Fahrenheit if you want to avoid stress and potential damage. So resilience versus ideal conditions, you know. For genuinely cold climates, further inland perhaps, a heated conservatory kept above, say, 15 degrees Celsius day and 6 degrees Celsius night, that's 500 and 143 degrees F, would definitely be needed.
And what about the other end of the scale, our hot Aussie summers? How does that intensity affect them?
Good point. Our summers, as you know, can be properly hot, an average of maybe 19 days a year going over 35 degrees Celsius or 95 Fahrenheit, and occasionally soaring over 40 C, which is 104 F. This intense heat means we need to be strategic about light exposure.
Okay, how so?
For a Port Jackson fig here in NSW, during the warmer months, say October through March, it generally needs about 7 hours of direct sun, preferably morning to early afternoon sun. Then it really benefits from some shade from around 2 meters onwards, just to protect it from that really intense, potentially scorching afternoon heat. In winter, when the sun is less intense and lower, you'd shift it to maybe a north-facing veranda where it can get approximately 5 hours of direct sun, perhaps from 8:30 a.m. to 2:40 p.m. That veranda cover is also crucial then for protecting it from those potentially frosty winter night temperatures we just talked about.
That attention to light and temperature really sounds vital. What about watering and feeding for our local Port Jackson figs?
Right. The Port Jackson fig, it truly enjoys ample water. It's actually quite difficult to overwater it, provided the soil drains well, that's key. Immersion watering, where you dunk the whole pot, is often recommended. You might do that daily in the very hottest months, then reduce it gradually to perhaps every 10 to 14 days in the depths of midwinter when growth slows right down.
And misting, does that help?
Yes, daily misting, especially in warmer conditions, is really beneficial. It helps offset dry air, which can sometimes prevent those desirable aerial roots from forming. Humidity encourages them. For fertilizing, a half-strength balanced liquid fertilizer applied fortnightly during the warmer growing months is usually good. You'd extend those intervals in spring and autumn as growth slows, and then stop feeding entirely from about April through to August during winter dormancy. Be careful not to over-fertilize, as that can lead to undesirably large leaves, which isn't what you want for bonsai.
Repotting can feel like a major operation for any plant. What's the best way to approach it with Port Jackson figs, given how robust you said they are?
They are vigorously rooting trees, and they tolerate major root reductions really well, which is great for bonsai. A 2-year interval for repotting and root pruning is generally a good aim, though you could probably stretch it to 4 years if needed. For young trees you're developing, annual root pruning for the first 3 to 5 years can be quite beneficial to build a good root system.
And the timing. Is there an ideal time?
Timing is surprisingly flexible with these tough guys. Your sources suggest root pruning can even be done during frost or extreme heat over 40 degrees Celsius or 104 Fahrenheit if you provide really good aftercare. However, for stress-free repotting in our climate, November is often considered the preferred time. This ensures those nighttime temperatures are consistently well above 10 degrees Celsius, about 50 Fahrenheit, which helps recovery. For the soil mix, you want something very well draining, neutral to slightly acidic. A good commercial bonsai mix works well, or a common suggestion is a mix of maybe 1 part well-mulched bark, 1 part pumice, and 1 part akadama, that's a Japanese granular clay, excellent for drainage and aeration.
It's really clear that understanding these local regional nuances is critical. How does this specific advice for, say, Sydney and the mid-north coast contrast with other parts of Australia, or just general advice for tropical fig?
Yeah, it really highlights a crucial point about climate specifics. Take Perth, for example. It's hot, but it's generally dry heat, which is a stark contrast to humid Sydney.
Yeah.
So generic temperate climate advice you might read often fails completely to address those extreme dry summer conditions. You need different strategies there, perhaps more focus on shade and humidity conservation.
I see.
And more generally, for many truly tropical ficus species, they'll likely start showing damage at around 4.4 degrees Celsius, which is about 40 Fahrenheit. They'll definitely slow down or stop growing altogether below 10°C or 50°F. So prolonged periods under 10°C are a real problem for them. Hard freezes mean you absolutely have to bring them indoors or have a heated greenhouse. And for doing major work like heavy pruning or repotting on these tropical types, you really want those evening temperatures to be consistently above about 18.3 Celsius or 65 Fahrenheit for optimal recovery.
Okay, this raises an important question then.
Well,
How do we actually apply specific bonsai techniques to these unique figs, especially thinking about our climate, to get those really stunning miniature trees? What techniques give us the most control, the best results?
absolutely. This is where the artistry really comes in. Let's start with defoliation. It sounds pretty drastic, removing leaves, but it's probably the single best technique for reducing the size of the leaves and also for increasing the density of the branches, what we call ramification. It gives the tree a much more refined and mature appearance. Plus, it lets you see the branch structure clearly for styling.
Right. How exactly does defoliation work, and when should we be doing it?
Well, you can do a full defoliation where you remove basically all the leaves. This strongly activates dormant buds all over the tree, leading to vigorous new growth. Or you can do partial defoliation, maybe just removing the larger leaves or leaves in the stronger areas. This can help slow down growth in those dominant parts, allowing weaker areas to catch up, which helps develop taper in the branches. There's also tipping, where you just pinch out the very tip of a growing shoot, maybe the emerging leaf plus one or two behind it. This also encourages back budding further down the branch. One crucial thing, though, always try to leave a few leaves on the very tips of the branches. This helps maintain the sap flow and can prevent branch dieback. As for timing, you do it during the main growing season when the tree is healthy and vigorous. Mid-December is suggested as a good time for a full defoliation here in Australia. For Port Jackson figs specifically, mid to late summer, maybe February is often recommended, with the new, smaller foliage regenerating in about 8 weeks. And after you defoliate, you need to protect the tree from extreme sun and wind, water a bit less frequently since it has fewer leaves losing moisture, and definitely hold off on fertilizing for at least a month.
What about the clip and grow method? I know that often avoids using wire, right?
That's right. The traditional clip and grow method, which has roots in the Chinese Lingnan school of penjing, focuses primarily on shaping the tree through careful pruning, using just scissors or shears, often without any wire at all. The modern application we often use focuses a lot on proportion and critically on wound healing, especially after making a large cut like a trunk chop.
How does that work with wound healing?
Well, after you make that big cut, the ideal scenario is to encourage two new buds or branches to emerge near the edge of the wound, maybe at the 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock positions, roughly speaking. These two opposing branches draw sap flow evenly across the wound and heal it over much more efficiently and naturally, creating a smooth transition. If you only get one branch growing from the side of the cut, the wound won't heal as well, and you don't make much progress in thickening that new section of trunk. This whole process of encouraging branches to divide into two like that is called bifurcation, and it's really fundamental to building high-quality, well-structured bonsai.
So you're guiding the growth, encouraging those divisions.
Exactly, and for rapid development, especially when starting out, the advice is often to put the tree in a large training pot or even in the ground, fertilize it heavily, and just let it grow pretty much untrimmed for a season or two to really thicken up. Then you make your major cuts and start refining. It's that tortoise beats the hare approach. Build the foundation first.
That makes a lot of sense. Let it get strong before you start shaping too much. But can wiring still be used with figs if needed?
Oh, absolutely. While clip and grow emphasizes cutting, wiring is definitely still used, especially for refining smaller branches and setting their position. For vigorous ficus growth, you generally want to use wire that's about 2/3 the diameter of the branch you're wiring. This helps prevent the wire from cutting into the bark too quickly as the branch thickens. Figs can be wired pretty much any time of year, but because they grow fast, you need constant vigilance to watch for wire bite for scarring. You might have to remove and reapply wire more often than with slower growing trees.
What about really thick branches? Too thick to wire?
Yeah. For very thick branches, say over 7 or 8 centimeters, about 3 inches thick, wiring isn't practical. In those cases, you can use techniques like wedge excisions, carefully removing a wedge of wood while leaving the bark bridge intact, or making several thin parallel cuts called kerf cuts. These allow you to carefully bend and reposition the heavy branch. And always apply cut paste or sealant to any significant cuts, say over 1.2 centimeters or half an inch, to aid healing and prevent infection.
One of the most iconic things about figs, especially banyans, is those incredible aerial roots. How can we encourage those to form on our bonsai?
Ah, yes, the banyan aesthetic. Species like Ficus microcarpa and our Ficus rubiginosa are particularly good at forming aerial roots, especially if you provide the right conditions, namely high humidity. You can encourage them using a few methods. Misting systems that periodically spray the trunk and branches can work, or you can try bagging the whole tree pot and all in a clear plastic bag.
Bagging it.
Yeah, just make sure it's out of direct sun or it'll cook. And poke some drainage holes in the bottom of the bag and open it up maybe weekly for some air exchange. Another effective method is mossing. Wrapping damp sphagnum moss around the trunk or branches where you want roots, then covering the moss loosely with plastic wrap or foil to keep the moisture in.
Okay, and once they start forming, they look so delicate.
They are delicate at first. You can actually guide these young, thin aerial roots down towards the soil using things like drinking straws or thin PVC pipes as protective channels. Once an aerial root reaches the soil and establishes, it will start to thicken up. To speed up the thickening of a particular aerial root, you can even plant its tip into a separate small training pot placed on the soil surface, or even guide it out of the main pot and into the ground if the tree is outdoors.
That's clever. What if you need to add a branch somewhere it's missing, or maybe cover up an old scar? I hear figs are quite fusible.
They are incredibly versatile in that way. Figs are remarkably fusible, meaning their tissues readily graft together. This makes grafting techniques really easy and highly successful compared to many other tree species. You can use grafting to add a branch exactly where you need it, to add roots for better stability or aesthetics, to cover unsightly scars, or even to fuse multiple smaller trees together to create a larger trunk much faster.
What's an easy grafting method for figs?
One of the easiest is the thread graft. You basically grow a long, thin, sacrificial branch, either on the same tree or from a separate small fig, and you literally thread it through a hole drilled right through the trunk where you want a new branch to be. You leave it to grow for a season or two until it fuses firmly inside the hole. Then you cut off the sacrificial branch on either side, leaving the fused section to grow as your new branch. It works surprisingly well. You can also take multiple rooted cuttings, bunch them together, and bind them tightly. Over time, they will fuse together into a single larger trunk or an impressive exposed root structure. And stylistically, figs are just so adaptable: formal upright, cascade, informal upright, root over rock, those banyan and strangler styles we talked about. They can do it all. Root over rock is particularly easy with figs. You just take a young plant with pliable roots, carefully arrange and attach them over a rough textured stone, plant the whole thing, and then gradually expose the roots over subsequent repottings as they grip the rock. They're also excellent for exposed root styles, especially if you grow them in deep pots with a coarse mix on top, which encourages the roots to grow downwards seeking moisture. And for those tiny shohin or main bonsai, you just need to select the small-leafed species or clones, or be really persistent with techniques like defoliation to keep the leaves in scale. Watering becomes absolutely critical for those tiny pots, though, as they dry out incredibly fast.
So, putting this all together, what does this mean for just the day-to-day care? How do we keep these bonsai happy and healthy in the long run? And what are the common pitfalls we really need to look out for?
Right, because all this knowledge is only valuable if you can apply it consistently. Proper daily care is really foundational to success. And let's circle back to light, because it's just so paramount for figs.
Light definitely seems to be a recurring theme, crucial for vigor, even when you're growing them indoors.
Absolutely crucial. Figs need ample light. If you're growing them indoors, a bright south or west-facing windowsill is helpful. But honestly, artificial lights, good quality LEDs, or even older metal halides are often necessary to provide enough intensity, especially in winter. Remember, light intensity drops off drastically even a short distance from the window or the light source. And rotate your trees regularly, maybe a quarter turn each week, to ensure they get light on all sides and grow evenly.
And moving them outdoors in summer.
Highly recommended for boosting their vigor if you can. But, and this is a big but, you must acclimatize them gradually. Moving a tree directly from relatively low indoor light into full, harsh summer sun will scorch the leaves badly and cause massive leaf drop. You need to do it over maybe 2 weeks, starting in full shade, then dappled light, then morning sun only, gradually increasing the exposure. And you have to reverse that process in autumn when bringing them back inside, typically when nighttime temperatures start dipping below about 13 degrees Celsius or 55 Fahrenheit for most tropical figs. This gradual transition minimizes stress and leaf drop. And always, always give them a thorough check for pests before you bring them back indoors. You don't want to bring hitchhikers inside.
Good tip. Now, what about soil and managing moisture? I know poor drainage is like the #1 bonsai killer for many people.
It really is. Drainage is absolutely paramount. I'd say most growers who lose trees, especially beginners, do so because of excessive root moisture leading to root rot. Figs need good aeration around their roots and consistent moisture, but they absolutely hate sitting in constantly soggy soil. They also don't like being bone dry for long periods either, though.
So finding that balance, what about the soil mix itself?
Particle size is key for drainage. Using particles mostly in the range of 2 to 8 millimeters, that's about 0.07 to 0.31 inches, is pretty common for bonsai mixes. You might use slightly smaller particles for the very small shohin pots. And it's really important to sieve your soil components to remove the fine dust and tiny particles, as these can clog up the air spaces in the pot. In terms of humidity, figs are quite tolerant and grow well in a range, but as we said, if you specifically want to encourage those aerial roots, you need to maintain consistently high humidity around the trunk and branches for weeks on end. Using pebble trays filled with water under the pod or even a small humidifier nearby can help boost local humidity, especially indoors during winter when heating systems dry the air out. And interestingly, allowing the soil surface to dry out moderately between waterings actually encourages more vigorous root growth, as the roots actively grow downward seeking moisture. Keeping the soil constantly wet can sometimes slow down overall growth.
Right, that wet-dry cycle. What are the key reminders for repotting and fertilizing then?
Okay, repotting. Best done in the warmest part of the year, as we said, usually late spring or summer here, when the fig is actively growing. This allows for the quickest recovery. Frequency. Most indoor figs probably benefit from repotting every 2 years or so, while the tiny shohin might need it yearly because their roots fill the pots so fast. Aftercare is important. Keep the newly repotted tree in a warm, well-lit spot, but definitely out of direct, harsh sun for a few weeks. Water only when the soil surface feels lightly dry to the touch. Don't keep it soaking wet. And hold off on fertilizing for at least a month to allow the roots to recover and start growing again. For trees that have had very heavy root pruning, putting them inside a clear plastic bag for a week or two, a sort of mini greenhouse, can really help them recover faster by maintaining high humidity.
And feeding.
For actively growing trees, fertilize regularly, maybe weekly, using a balanced inorganic fertilizer at half to full recommended strength. You stop feeding in autumn as growth slows, and then resume again in late winter or early spring as buds start to swell. Crucially, never fertilize a tree when the soil is bone-dry water at first, then fertilize maybe an hour later or the next day. And just be aware, if you choose to use organic fertilizers, they can sometimes attract fungus gnats indoors or even animals like possums if the tree is outdoors.
Okay, good to know. And finally, what about those dreaded pests and diseases? What should we be particularly vigilant about here in Australia with our Ficus bonsai?
Vigilance is definitely key because catching problems early makes them much easier to treat. Common pests for ficus include scale insects, those little bumps on stems and leaf spider mites, which thrive in dry conditions and cause stippling on leaves. Ficus salicaria seems particularly susceptible. And mealybugs, which look like little white cottony masses, often hiding in leaf axils or even on the roots. Always check the roots during repotting.
Mealybugs on the roots.
Yes.
Ugh.
Yeah, they can be sneaky. Also watch for aphids on new growth, thrips. Cuban laurel thrips are a major issue for Ficus microcarpa outdoors in warmer tropical areas, causing distorted bronzed leaves. Less common but possible are borers, whitefly, and those annoying little fungus gnats buzzing around the soil, usually indicating it's staying too wet. Root knot nematodes can also be a problem in some areas.
And diseases.
Fungal problems are probably the most common disease issue, usually caused by prolonged wet conditions and poor air circulation. So improving air movement around the tree, maybe thinning out overly dense branches, and avoiding unnecessary misting can help prevent them. If things get severe, you might need to use a fungicide. Another one to be aware of is fig mosaic virus. It causes yellow patches or patterns on the leaves, distorted growth, and premature leaf drop. Unfortunately, there's no treatment for viruses like this, so infected trees should really be discarded to prevent spreading it to others via tools or pests.
So early detection is vital. What are the telltale signs?
Look for sticky honeydew secretions on leaves that often indicate scale or aphids. Fine webbing, especially on the undersides of leaves, points to spider mites. Those white cottony patches mean mealybugs, and distorted, curled, or bronze new leaves could be thrips. Just keep a close eye on your trees regularly.
And just a final piece of advice, maybe, for keeping our figs really flourishing long term.
I think it's important to remember the rhythm of growth. Don't try to keep your tree in perfect show condition all year round by constantly trimming every new shoot. Allow it periods of, slightly untrimmed growth, maybe in spring or summer. This lets the tree build up energy reserves in its roots and trunk. Constantly pruning can weaken it over time. Think of it as a natural cycle, periods of vigorous growth, followed by periods of refinement and rest. Giving your tree that time to recover and strengthen is key to its long-term health and beauty.
Wow, what an absolutely incredible journey into the world of Ficus bonsai that was. We've really explored their amazing ancient origins, their diverse forms, from that intricate wasp symbiosis right up to those, well, colossal strangler figs. And we've really honed in on the specific care they need right here in our unique Australian climates, particularly for you listening in Sydney and up to the mid-north coast. Hopefully, you now have a much deeper understanding of fantastic species like our own resilient Port Jackson fig and some powerful techniques like defoliation and that clip and grow method.
It really is such a rewarding pursuit, isn't it? Cultivating these tiny, living sculptures, there's always something new to learn.
Indeed. And just as we close out this deep dive, here's something to maybe ponder. The incredible resilience of a ficus allows it to mimic a centuries-old forest within the confines of a pot, or even to completely envelop a host tree to eventually stand entirely alone. What lessons in adaptability, in persistent, powerful growth, perhaps even in transformation, could your miniature fig teach you about navigating the challenges and opportunities in your own life?